97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco. Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
You know, we recognize the ability of the roster that's put together right now. And I think we have the ability to do something really special with this group, but it's going to take a lot of hard work.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
It's Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. Andrew DiCecco is in the house. Jim Schwartz talking today. Dave Phipps said some interesting things today as well. The Eagles making a flurry of roster moves. Let's get into it with Andrew DiCecco from 97.3 ESPN.com, InsideTheBirds.com, and he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. As Andrew, some interesting moves today. I'd like to get your thoughts on some of these guys. First off, Dallas Goedert, he's going to miss at least 3 weeks. He has a fractured ankle, so a lot of questions off this here. Number one, do they stick with their plan of 12 personnel that they like to run? Do they only run that because they have Ertz and Goddard, or are they going to stick with that? And if they do, what are some of the options if they want to stick with 12 personnel?
Well, Mike, I think that they have to stick with 12 personnel because the only healthy receivers that they have going into Sunday for sure are John Hightower and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, I think. So and Greg Ward, rather, excuse me. So they're very limited in what they can do there as far as receivers. You do have Richard Rodgers, who's a veteran tight end that they can use in that regard. He doesn't come close to comparing to what God can give you from a tight end and athleticism standpoint. But I think they're going to have to get creative in what they can do because they have very limited offensive pieces they can work with. You might have to see some Boston Scott in the slot and some different things like that.
All right, they did make a couple of moves today. Jason Kroom, they added from the practice squad in Atlanta, and also just recently here, they brought in Hakeem Bryant and labeled him as a tight end, and they got him off the Carolina practice squad and had to put him on the active roster. Any shot you see him play and fill that role as Dallas Goedert, maybe as that Josh Perkins role, a tight end who's really a wide receiver but kind of a bigger guy?
Yeah, real quick on Hakeem Butler, just to kind of give some fans a backstory on him. He was a player that a lot of draft pundits had. Some had him rated as high as second-round pick. I personally had him rated as a third-round pick coming out of Iowa State. He ran a 4.48 at the NFL Combine. He had 60 catches and 9 touchdowns as a senior at Iowa State. He's very big and lanky. He has his hands are 10 3/4 inch hands, and he has nearly an 84-inch wingspan. But some of his concerns on why it didn't work out for him with the Arizona Cardinals is that he has a limited route tree, an inability to separate in the short intermediate routes against press coverage specifically, and he really struggled with drops in his rookie training camp, so much so that the Cardinals almost had to release him had it not been for the broken hand that landed him on IR. He also had 12 drops in 2017. So that has been some of the hindrance on him. And as you can see with the Cardinals, they are a team that has built themselves on speed and explosive players. And he doesn't really quite fit that mold. And I think, and also coupled in with them drafting Andy Isabella in the 3rd round last year and Keyshawn Johnson in the 6th round, he just kind of fell behind the pecking order and was never able to recover. I do think that he gives the Eagles something as a move hybrid tight end type player, reminiscent to what Trey Burton gave the Eagles under the Chip Kelly era. If you remember, they moved him around quite a bit before settling as a tight end under Doug Peterson. So he does have some athletic traits there that are going to be interested to see how he kind of is utilized in the offense. But going into week 1, I would temper my expectations with Hakeem Butler.
Yeah, I know Butler as a guy, big physical guy, and obviously that kind of big physical ability kind of stands out, but he has not had really any success at this level. I thought it was interesting that they named him as a tight end as over a wide receiver. Maybe they feel like they can get more of him out in that position there. So we'll see. If Goddard doesn't go, you playing Richard Rodgers there? What are you doing at that second tight end spot in the 12?
Yeah, to me, that goes to Richard Rodgers. He's a veteran. He's been a starter in the league before. He's played at a relatively high level with the Green Bay Packers. He obviously is a shell of his former self right now. He's bounced around a little bit, hasn't really been able to stick on a 53-man roster until now. But obviously you're going to lean on your veteran there in 12 personnel. You know what you're going to get out of him. Doesn't have quite the high ceiling as maybe a Hakeem Butler, but he knows the system. He's been around a while, and I think that going forward, looking at what their receiving options are, he really is one of the more stable pieces on there right now, which tells you all you need to know about the state of their offensive weapons.
Quez Watkins is in the 21-day window. I talked about at the beginning of the show. Look, the kid Hardman was a second-round pick. Hill had some problems. That's why he dropped to the 5th round. Robinson's a 4th-round pick. They accentuate the positives of their personnel. They don't have Watkins was a 1st-round pick. He's probably the worst guy they got out there. Point is, you can accentuate the positives of these guys and get something from them. So is it intriguing by you that they put Watkins in this 21 day? In other words, are they willing to take a look at him and say, hey, maybe this guy can help us out?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at what Quez Watkins can bring from an athleticism standpoint, he's incredibly fast. That's his hallmark. He's a speed guy. He can also help on punt returns, which the Eagles have really struggled in that area. Obviously, they've been using Greg Ward in that role, but he's more of a sure-handed guy that they go to. He's not really going to give you much after on the return, but he's more of a sure-handed guy. I think Quez Watkins, the Eagles have shown that they're willing to throw a rookie out there. You saw what they did with John Hightower. John Hightower nearly outsnapped J.J. Arcega-Whiteside in the season opener. He had 27 snaps, I believe, and that was it's a 5th-round pick. So I think that the Eagles they're not in a position to be too picky as far as, can we put this guy out there? They have very limited numbers at the receiver position. He has the speed to take the top off of the defense. So I think that, as he enters his 21-day window, as soon as he's ready, I have a feeling that they're going to have to promote him rather than, look elsewhere to bring in someone that's not familiar with the system.
Yeah, you look at the wide receivers. You mentioned the limitations. DeSean Jackson, I would imagine, is iffy this week. Probably a coin flip 50-50 whether he plays. Greg Ward, we think, will be out there. What do you suggest at the other spot? How do you break up those snaps? Last week they gave most to Hightower. What's the way to kind of break up those snaps at the X position?
Mike, I was actually, upon further review of watching the tape, John Hightower actually separated relatively well on Sunday, particularly against the second corner from the Bengals, which there's plays that could have been made down the field that whether Carson didn't see him, there wasn't a trust there, or whatever there was, some sort of a disconnect. But I thought that John Hightower, I thought he did pretty well in his snaps. He really maximized the snaps to improve from his lackluster week 2 where he didn't see any snaps and he really struggled in week 1. So it's good to see that natural progression from him. I think that he would get taking DeSean and JJ out of the equation. I think that you should probably allocate most of those snaps to the X to a John Hightower, but let's not forget Greg Ward has seen some plays on the outside. Greg Cosell mentioned that he also does have, while he's known as a slot receiver primarily, he also play on the outside, scored his touchdown from the Z position on Sunday, which is interesting to note. So you do have a couple of options there. It's just still very limited and the personnel, and you're going to have to get creative with some of your pass-catching running backs and move them around as well because there's uncertainty surrounding DeSean Jackson and JJ going into this weekend.
You mentioned, there was a couple times where Hightower opened. Looks like Wentz didn't see him. You feel that there's a trust factor, though, with Hightower there. Like, is that more on Wentz? Is it more on Hightower? I mean, it just seems to me, we talked a little about this yesterday, it looked like Wentz only trusts Ward.
Yeah, that's been a problem over the past couple of seasons. He kind of becomes infatuated with with guys that he's comfortable with and always seems to look their way. You look at Zach Ertz, you look at Dallas Goedert and Greg Ward, right? Those are the 3 guys that he really has built that rapport with, and he's going to go to when, in crunch time. But, these are the guys that Carson has to throw to. So you don't really have a choice. If the guy's open, throw it up there and let him make a play on the football. I mean, rather than hold it and take a sack or or worse, force it into a tight window, or not the proper shoulder, which we've seen, through 3 weeks of the season. These are the guys that you have to work with. So put the ball out there, let them make a play on it, and let the chips fall where they may. That's what I believe.
Yeah, and I know that right now. I mean, look, this is a huge game for the season. 0-3, you don't make the playoffs. The tie actually, it helped in retrospect, and nobody wants to hear it. The tie helps them out. It kept them at least, somewhat on life support here. 0-3, you're in all sorts of trouble. But they got all sorts of injuries. Avonte Maddox injured. What do they do there?
Well, that's where it's going to get interesting, right? Because I think that Crevon LeBlanc is a player that can play inside or outside. Ideally, you would like to keep him in the nickel. He doesn't have the length, but I do think that Trevor Williams, this is where his experience comes into play here. We saw Jim Schwartz kind of come out and praise Trevor Williams for playing the man, consecutive plays. I believe it was 12 plays and man-to-man coverage in overtime. He advocated for him, which is encouraging to hear. I don't know that they have much of a choice right now, so it might be Trevor Williams going into that game. But it's going to be tricky. But let's not forget that the 49ers are also very depleted on their end as well.
Yeah, they are, and I know there's a couple angles with this in terms of the injuries up front. Is this a game where, look, I'm not going to ask you if you think they're going to run the ball more, but is that the best way to go about it with the injuries they have up front? Yeah,
I mean, I think that's the way that the Eagles need to go because their pass weapons, they're lacking in weaponry right now. So Miles Sanders is on a roll. He's had 95 yards the past 2 weeks. Get him going. Obviously, you want to shoot for the 18 to 20 touch mark for him. You don't want to overuse him. But let's get Boston Scott involved in the running game and in the passing game. Corey Clement, he struggled finding his footing as a runner, but he's a capable pass receiver. Get him out on some wheel routes or something like that. Get creative, and you're going to have to use these guys. And the thing is that's what this is what they're going to have to do. But the 49ers do have some guys on the defensive line. They're depleted, but they do have guys like a veteran like a Kerry Hyder who had two sacks, who has 2 sacks in the season, and Eric Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, who I was very high on coming out of South Carolina. He's a rookie defensive tackle. They do have some guys there, so they're not exactly as depleted as one may think on the defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, they've been drafting there. The depth is there. The defense is pretty good. I mean, even though this team is banged up, they got their hands full. And I would imagine, I don't know what you think is going to happen at quarterback if they play Garoppolo or Mullins, but, Mullins has had some games where he fires them up. So they got a lot of speed on that offensive side of the ball. This defense that Jim Schwartz, who spoke today, they're going to have their hands full. I want to ask you about the linebacking situation in this week, because I thought last week, and we touched on this a little yesterday, that they game planned a lot for Geary. And I would imagine that the tape is out there that you can go after Geary, confuse him, get him moving the opposite way, and that the San Francisco 49ers have the right personnel to do that.
They do to an extent, Mike. They have, obviously, Ross Dwelley is going to be the starting tight end this week. He had a productive college career at San Diego, but he hasn't done much in the NFL in his 3 seasons. He had 4 receptions for 49 yards last week. He's more of a natural pass catcher. He gives you virtually nothing as a blocker, but he can work the short to intermediate routes, and he has very short hands. He seems to be establishing a rapport with Nick Mullins. You saw that last week, obviously. He was one of his leading receivers in Nick Mullins' 343-yard passing day. And the running back situation, you're going to see a lot of Jerick McKinnon out there on passing routes. Brandon Ayuk is a player that they like, that they're going to try to isolate and get him in open space. He's a rookie wide receiver. And Jeff Wilson is a running back that he doesn't really give you much as far as explosive plays. He's more of their ground and pound guy that's going to get you that tough yardage. He only averages 3.6 yards for his career, but he's more of that 215-pound short yardage goal line guy that they like to use, so they can also go that route as well.
What impressed you moving forward here about that defensive front? I thought Cox played his best game, and he was coming off, had the injury. I thought he finally had a big impact. Graham. So watching that defensive front, is that enough reason to start to feel better about this defense?
Yes, but I would say I would caution the overexcitement because they played the Bengals. They did their job. They executed. That was what they're supposed to do. The Bengals have the worst offensive line in football. That said, the Eagles answered the bell and they did what they were supposed to do. Derek Barnett, one of his 2 sacks came against the tight end. Obviously that one was sort of a freebie, but it was nice to see him get 2 sacks. I was really impressed with Brandon Graham. Brandon Graham continues to be one of the most underrated defensive linemen in football. Very explosive off the line, plays the run extremely well, has a quick get off, and plays with outstanding leverage. He's someone that I've been very impressed with this season. Fletcher Cox had the game that we've all been waiting for. He's been relatively quiet, even dating back to the end of last season. You want to see Javon Hargrave start to get in a rhythm, and Malik Jackson Jackson's been playing. He has been playing well in a rotational role. Josh Sweat's he's been a pleasant surprise as a defensive end coming in. He had a sack in the first quarter last week. Very long arms, athletic, tough to block. Gets around the edge very quickly. Has terrific bend. So they do have some guys there that can make this offensive line pay.
Hey, let me ask you about Alshon Jeffrey. I don't know if he plays this week, if you have a feel there or not, but does he help this offense? I know he's a veteran, and obviously he's better than what they have, but what he brings, that's not what they're missing, right?
What he brings is exactly what they're missing right now in a tall possession receiver that can go up and get the football and win in contested catch situations, be a red zone presence. And they are sorely lacking, a veteran outside of DeSean Jackson in the receiving core.
Yeah.
When Alshon makes plays, he's very tough to get to tackle, to bring to the ground. He gets the sideline fired up. He kind of he infuses life and energy into the offense, and I think that he has that rapport with Carson Wentz, and he makes Carson's life a lot easier. Get him going on some short receptions, let him run after the catch, and use his big frame to kind of manufacture yards after the catch. I think he's exactly what the offense needs.
Okay, I guess the way that I said, I'm talking about he is kind of what they have in terms of underneath, not going to stretch the field, doesn't have a lot of speed.
Right,
you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the same problem they had last year. They lose Jackson, and we thought, wow, they lose Jackson this year. Marquise Goodwin, well, he opted out. Oh, Jalen Reagor, well, now he's hurt. Quez Watkins, well, he's hurt too. So you had all this speed, and here you are in 3 weeks into the season, and he got no speed again.
Yeah, and that's where a guy like Quez Watkins, it's going to be interesting to monitor where he's at throughout the week. Even if you're just sending him on some go routes, just to have that threat, that deep threat that makes the defensive backs, keeps them on their toes a little bit. That's paramount. I mean, DeSean Jackson, even when he's not going out there and catching these deep bombs, just his sheer presence in the offense worries defensive backs. It's going to shade a little extra coverage to his side and open things up for everybody else. I think Quez Watkins would be, if he's able to play, obviously that would be an asset. But John Hightower, to me, is someone that Carson needs to trust. He's been open, throw the football out there. He can stretch a team. He can work all 3 levels of the field. He's a longer-bodied receiver that they don't have a lot of right now. Just, there's going to be opportunities there for him to take advantage of the 49ers secondary. And I think that when you talk about the lack of speed, well, you have a guy there that has been winning some of his matchups. So, it would be negligence on his part to kind of not look his way.
Would you be interested in Earl Thomas with this defense?
No. Short answer, no. What he brings, he's obviously caused a little friction in his past stop, and what the Eagles need right there, he wouldn't necessarily gel in that locker room. The Eagles have enough leadership in that locker room, and they don't necessarily need a player like that on there. As good as Earl Thomas has been, he's played a lot of football in his career. Some might say he's on the downside of his career. Would he help the team? Yes, but to what extent? Is it worth taking a risk on a player like that who may be a locker room, nuisance and create other problems there? I think that if they were to go, if they wanted to bring in a veteran safety, they could go another route.
Today, Dave Phipp had some interesting things to say in regard. Did you get the feeling, I don't know if you heard Phipp, but just going through the transcript, that it almost seemed like he wanted to see Elliott try the field goal? Did you get that? Did you get that from his presser today?
Yeah, I agree. If you read the tea leaves, he works closely with with Jake Elliott, and he knows exactly what he's capable of. Knows that he had the weather was perfect. He was on that day, and he's got a big leg, and you kind of got the sense that just get the guy out there and let him attempt the field goal and see what he can do. He's got the leg for it. He's proven that he can hit from 60 plus before, obviously. So that's kind of what I took from that as well.
Yeah, I know that he kind of had some back and forth, and he actually did mention that he kind of blamed himself for not having like a plan what to do if there was a penalty. And, and prior when offsides, it just seemed like a Chinese fire drill. Like nobody knew what was going on. They didn't know what to do, and they just end up punting it. But it sounded like they didn't really have a plan for what happens if we don't kick this ball.
Yeah, that's concerning because in football you have to have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. You have to always plan for the unexpected, and obviously you don't anticipate a guy who's been around for a few seasons and Matt Pryor to make that play. But that's what happened, and you have to. The game of football is you have to think on your toes sometimes, and that's exactly what happened. They kind of got caught, they got caught unexpectedly there, and that's just inexcusable.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember about, I don't want to say about 2008, 9, somewhere in that range.
Scott Young?
No, Sebastian Janikowski. Kiflin was the coach of the Raiders. He tried a 76-yard field goal. He got fired the next day. You remember that?
Yeah, but, I do remember that. And Janikowski had a monster leg. And obviously you're going for the gusto there. You're going for the 76-yard field goal. You're playing to win. That resonates with your locker room. Obviously, the higher ups didn't feel the same way, and that's why he wasn't there. But I mean, that's the kind of mindset that you want to have, that aggressive mindset. You always want to play for the win, especially when you have a kicker with a leg like Jake Elliott has.
Yeah, and we've seen him kick. And we could contend, or I would contend, that 61-yard game winner that he hit against the Giants really springboarded that season and got him off to a championship run. Who knows if he makes that field goal, if that just kind of turns the feeling of everything around here. That's another reason why you might consider letting him kick that ball, knowing what that time he hit that 61 do for you the last time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a turning point. And also the Carolina game on Thursday Night Football, where they took on Cam Newton, who was playing at a very high level at that point. Jake Elliott's 61-yard field goal. And let's not forget, he had a little bit more leg in him as you saw the ball go through. He could have probably hit from 63 that day. So Jake Elliott has a huge leg. So to not take advantage of that in that situation, that was just completely baffling. I'm still stunned by it.
Again, the optics of the tie look bad, but the tie is certainly better than the loss. It doesn't mean you were going to win the game if they kicked it. Doesn't mean you were going to win the game if they went for it. And it doesn't mean you were going to lose the game if they tried. But in the end, the tie is much more beneficial than losing the game. And again, doesn't mean they were going to lose that game if they went for it. There was a lot of time. There wasn't that much time. 19 seconds. If you kick the field goal, probably 3, 4, 5 seconds come off the clock, and then your defense has to essentially make one stop or something like that.
Exactly.
Hey, it was bizarre, but 0-2-1. They got to have it Sunday night against a very good 49ers team because they're going through a gauntlet of a schedule. By the way, what's left on the Eagles' schedule right now is the most difficult schedule in the NFL by win percentage, so they got that up against them as well. All right, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thanks, pal.
My pleasure, guys.
Yeah, man, and we'll talk to Andrew, of course, on Monday and Tuesday. Tomorrow, Jeff Mosher is in the house. Kaplan is back on Thursday. Mosher's back on Friday. Football at 4, brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. Go to PlaySugarHouse.com. Win real money with their sports book along with casino games from the comfort of your home. Must be 21 or older to play. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. It's the Sports Bash. I'm Mike Gill.